Banks feel the need that it's about time that they should remove the excess stimulus in the system.
Ion-Marc, welcome back to Dukascopy TV. It's a pleasure to speak to you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, and today we're going to look a bit at central banks and a few things that are going on and what we can expect to see moving forward. So let's start by looking at, can central banks remove stimulus and reduce their balance sheets?
Well, I think the feeling is there. We heard from the ECB with Draghi last couple of weeks. Yellen from the Fed spoke also at the same time. There's a willingness that the economy is recovering, has recovered. The growth is about not as strong as it used to be, but it's still strong. Unemployment is coming down, and so banks feel the need that it's about time that they should remove the excess stimulus in the system. The issue is that in Europe we still have negative rates, so we need to push that over to at least zero, and then start winding down the balance sheets. My issue is that since the crisis, 2009. Central banks have expanded their balance sheet extremely. Now the ECB balance sheet is bigger than the Fed. The Bank of Japan has done the same thing. The Swiss National Bank has done the same thing. Some of them buy bonds, some of them buy bonds and stocks, and I think there's too much money in the system, and so this needs to be pulled down and let the markets find their equilibrium. If not, we're going to create another crisis in the next few years.
So what do you think is the next move for the central banks with this in mind, in how they can sort of drain this liquidity and stop the equities advance?
Sure. Well, it's a bit tricky because every time they start talking about removing stimulus, the market takes a dive, although not so big this time, but then they get scared again and then they come back on their word. As Yellen said last night, all of a sudden she's now dovish. She doesn't feel the need to raise interest rates again for this year, and the reduction of the balance sheet is maybe in July, maybe in September. So it's a tricky proposition. But I feel that, first of all, for Europe, they need to bring back the rates at least at zero. I mean, negative rates make no sense anywhere in the world. Now the Fed, they're dovish again, so maybe they start a program now in September. If they do start the program by letting the matured securities run off, as they would call it, not pulling more than that, that would also be a nice step in the right direction. And if the ECB brings back rates to zero, and then following that with the Swiss National Bank, bringing back from 0.75 negative to closer to zero, as Europe does the same thing, so as not to affect the Swiss francs, that would be a right process. Now, there's been a lot of liquidity in the crisis in 2009 in the system. Our belief is that the equities have risen a lot thanks to that. So I don't think it's going to rise as fast, or maybe even fall a little bit, as the liquidity is pulled off and we start seeing that a lot of the businesses were only kept up thanks to the liquidity and not because they're strong and growing.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick point on Europe and the euro. There's been quite a positive tone coming out of it. Are you positive about Europe moving forward?
Well, we've been positive overall since the 2009 the coming out of the crisis on equities, and we were most bullish all throughout that period up until the beginning of this year. Now we feel that since the liquidity is being removed, it's going to be a little bit tricky. European situation is doing a lot better. They've taken care of some of the issues regarding some of the banks. The companies are growing again. There's a sense that the unemployment numbers are coming down, so that's a positive. At the same time, thanks to the liquidity, all the states have only increased the debt levels. So we're in a worse situation in that sense. So it's going to be difficult. How does the ECB remove stimulus, and how do the states deal with their huge amounts of debt?
Yeah. So traditionally, we'd say that the markets are kind of supposed to climb this sort of wall of worries, as it were. But what happens now when there doesn't really seem to be any?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. Now there's less and less worries. We've taken care of the political situation in Europe. Brexit's probably going to work its way out slowly, but not a hard situation. The central banks are there to protect pretty much any fall in the equity markets. And so the question arises that if there's no worries, then any little thing or any little outside that nobody thought about could take the markets down hard. So that's why we feel that coming now out of this nice run that we had, even from the beginning of the year, we need to take a step back and be a little bit more cautious, and I think it will pay off.
Ion-Marc, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. And if you like this and would like to see more, be sure to head over to dukascopy.tv.